So if you're ready, creeps, fasten your drool cups and hold on to your vomit bags. We're going to the movies! Frights, camera, action!
Okay. Show me.
Show some fucking respect for the dead, will ya?
There they are. They were inside you the whole time. You did have guts.
There's something out there waiting for us.
I have seen the dark shadows moving in the woods.
It's all true. The undead surround me.
There'll be food and drink and ghosts, and perhaps even a few murders. You're all invited.
Welcome to All Guts No Glory, a horror review show where we cover everything from Crawl to Slither. And today I'm covering my very first sequel, which is Friday the 13th Part 2. I covered the first one like 2 months ago. I'm the only one editing these things. Sometimes I fall behind. You get it. Anyway, once Friday the 13th became a big hit, Paramount saw dollar signs and stepped in. They saw a winning formula of horny teenagers getting hacked up by a steady silent villain they could market to audiences. Opposing Paramount was Sean Cunningham, who figured since Miss Voorhees was dead that Friday the 13th could be an anthology series, something that would eventually be tried with the Halloween series. When Paramount said hell no to that idea, Sean Cunningham, Tom Savini, and Vic Miller all dropped out from the movie, citing the stupidity of Jason suddenly being an adult who had lived in the woods.
So now this phenomenon takes place, and Friday the 13th opens around the world, and it's a big hit. And the powers that be said, we have to make a sequel. And I'm saying, why did you make a sequel?
Let me make one thing totally clear. At the beginning of my movie, Jason is dead. There's no two ways about it. Jason is totally, unalterably dead.
Mrs. Voorhees is dead, and the image of Jason in the lake is completely a fabrication of the mind. I don't know what in the world we could do for a sequel.
They offered me part 2, and then I got the script, and Jason is running around. I thought, what are you doing? There is no Jason. No, the mother's the killer. Jason was a kid that drowned in the lake. Oh, we're gonna change all that. Well, they never did.
Just shows up some X number of years later, and I don't know that I'd want to try to fill in the blanks of what happened in between all those years.
Legend has it that Jason saw his mother beheaded that night.
If you try to track that on any kind of a timeline, it makes no sense whatsoever.
He didn't drown in the lake. The mother thought he drowned in the lake. So what happened to this child? He was young. He kind of found a way to survive, and he grew up in the woods, surviving any way he can.
So what is he? Is he living off crayfish by the pond for 35 years and nobody saw this weird kid?
11 movies later, we can see that obviously the studio was right. So Friday the 13th Part 2 was given the green light with a new team behind the scenes. As far as writing goes, Vic Miller is out, replaced by Ron Kurz in his only notable writing job. As far as directing goes, Sean Cunningham is out, replaced by Steve Miner, who had worked with Cunningham before as a production assistant and assistant editor on Last House on the Left, and as an associate producer and assistant director on the first Friday the 13th movie. And finally, as far as special effects go, Savini is out, choosing to work on The Burning instead. He's replaced by 4-time Academy Award winner Stan Winston, who also drops out, leaving the job to Karl Fullerton. Fullerton will go on to do the effects for Silence of the Lambs and then become Denzel Washington's personal makeup artist. Seriously, check IMDb, he's worked with Denzel 21 times. I learned interesting stuff while doing my research. So if Paramount knew they had a winning formula, then you can guess that Part 2 is a rehash of the first movie. And it is. There's a new group of teenagers, the most important of which are Ginny and Paul, played by 2 actors with the coolest last names in this whole series, Amy Steele and John Fury. Why they didn't form an acting team called Steel Fury after this, I'll never know. This new group of teenagers is killed off 1 by 1 and sometimes 2 by 2 by a silent villain in the same manner as the first movie. But obviously Miss Voorhees is still dead, so she's replaced by Jason in his one and only appearance as Baghead Jason. Until the remake. Baghead Jason is likely based on the town that dreaded sundown, which is based on the real-life, never-caught Texarkana Phantom. Baghead Jason is played by Steve Daskowitz, aka Steve Dash, who might be my favorite person to play Jason. Alright, aside from Kane Hodder. Just listen to Steve Dash talk. He reminds me of my friends and family in Staten Island.
Once I put the bag over my head and I ran in the woods, I couldn't see anything because the bag flopped back and forth. Well, we'll put double-faced tape and we'll hold it right close to your eye. This way you'll see where you're going. And it worked marvelously. It was terrific.
The fact that he didn't play a character on Sopranos is one of the greatest fuck-ups in television history. He's about as close as we'll get to a Sopranos Friday the 13th crossover. wonder what that would be like.
Let me call you back, my food's here. Oh! The fuck is this?
It's your meatballs, sir.
Where's the gabagool? Leo, how's your been?
Good, how you doing?
Good, I'm
How's
good.
Crystal Lake?
Not bad, you know, a couple days away from the kids. Got something for you. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Enjoy yourself.
Nice. Where'd you get this from, Tony? Sorry, what was I doing? Right, the introduction. The last thing I want to mention is that thanks to Friday the 13th being a success, another group stepped in when it came to part 2, and that's those fuckers at the Motion Picture Association of America, who in one way or another censored every single kill in this movie. The uncensored kills would not see the light of day until Edwin Samuelson, who produced the bonus content on the Friday the 13th box set, contacted Karl Fullerton, thinking he might have the footage stashed away somewhere. And he was right. Fullerton had a VHS with all the uncut footage on it. So for this video, when I show a kill, I'll show it censored, then uncensored, because the MPAA don't got shit on me. So with all that said and done, let's do the same thing we did before and get the sequel party started. Friday the 13th Part 2 begins 2 months after the first movie, with Jason Voorhees walking across some rainy pavement. This marks the first and last time Jason was played by a woman, since those legs belong to costume designer Ellen Lutter. Alice Hardy, the lone survivor of Miss Voorhees' massacre in Part 1, is laying in bed having nightmares about her ordeal, giving us, the audience, 5 goddamn minutes of unnecessary flashbacks to the first movie that had just come out 11 months before this one. Alice finally wakes up and we get an opening scene that's just kinda silly. First, Alice gets a phone call from her mother, then we get some stalker point of view shots, which aren't stalker point of view shots because Alice would have made eye contact with the killer, so it looks less like a horror movie and more like a reality show. Then she gets another phone call and the person on the other line stays silent, which means we're meant to believe it's Jason calling her from what? A payphone? Then there's a cat scare to just add to the overplayed trope sandwich before Alice finds Mrs. Voorhees' head in the fridge and backs right into Jason, who promptly kills her with an ice pick to the temple. This is one of those kills that was censored by the MPAA. The uncensored version shows the ice pick exiting through Alice's nose. Not a big difference, but cool nonetheless. Also, there was at least one take where the retractable point of the ice pick didn't retract and really began to stab Adrian King in the head. Alice's entire scene, from the nightmare to the phone call to her death, was improvised by Adrian King, who wasn't even given a script. So if you're wondering why Friday the 13th would bring back Alice just to kill her off, there's actually 2 reasons. The first is her agent asked for too much money, ruining her chances of being in the movie. And the second reason is a pretty sad story that I'll let Adrian King explain herself.
Well, Friday the 13th was the greatest experience for me up until the point of after it opening. It was huge, it was fabulous, it was an actor's dream come true. It certainly was for me. And then slowly I realized I had a stalker. The stalking was not taken seriously back in 1980. And it wasn't something that everyone was aware of. I was starting to get phone calls back then. It was so easy to get phone numbers. He got into my apartment for over a year. I didn't know who my stalker was. And what happened was he befriended me. He actually worked his way into my life, so I was actually giving him information about my stalker. I had an ordeal with him up close at one point, which in itself is a horror movie. Eventually, I had a gun to my head, and I was able to talk the fan down. It really took its toll for a while.
She's doing much better now, and credits the fans of Friday the 13th for helping her get her life together.
It's all okay now. It's all good now. And having 3 generations of fans from around the world that fly in to wherever I am at a city or a convention that really talk to me and care and tell me how much it affected them when they found out, it's just a gift. It's a beautiful thing, and I thank them.
After Alice's death, we jump ahead 5 years to the distant future of 1984, where we meet Jeff and Sandra. This movie's Jack and Marcy. While they're making a phone call, their car gets towed and they run after it, but it turns out they've been misled by this movie's prankster Ted, who's a copy of Ned, who was found dead above Jack in a bunk bed. I already like Ted better than Ned. The towing thing is actually a funny prank, so kudos to him. As these clone characters drive down the road, we even get the same shot from the first one. Holy shit, man. Although it's not the exact same road, since Friday the 13th Part 2 was shot in Connecticut instead of New Jersey. Jeff, Sandra, and Ted are stopped by a tree branch in the road. While the guys move it, Sandra stumbles across an old Camp Crystal Lake sign. Ted mumbles about Camp Blood but refuses to elaborate, Jason watches from the woods as they drive off. At the campsite, we meet Paul Holt, this movie's version of Steve Christie, and he gives an introduction that blatantly tells you who's important and who's not.
Okay, the rest of you, I'm sure I'll get to know soon enough.
You won't. The important characters are Terry, whose whole personality revolves around being hot and having a dog named Muffin. Scott, whose whole thing is that he's horny and chasing after Terry, even though they literally look like brother and sister. Then there's Mark, who's in a wheelchair. And finally Vicky, whose whole thing is that she's horny for Hot Wheels. Late to the party is this movie's main heroine, Ginny. Punch Buggy! Oh shit, did I get you? Like Alice and Steve, Ginny and Paul are having a boss and employee affair. But I will say Ginny already seems more spunky than Alice.
Ginny, I was starting to worry about you.
Bullshit, Paul.
Later that night, Paul tells the story of Jason to the kids around the campfire.
But I'm gonna give it to you straight about Jason. His body was never recovered from the lake after he drowned.
He tells them that Jason is still out there hungry for blood when Ted pops up and scares everyone. I love the attention to detail of Mark trying to wheel the fuck out of there. As the characters hang out, we get some more character development, if you can call it that. Mark is really good at arm wrestling, Vicky gives him the fuck me eyes, Terry is hanging out with her dog, and Scott pops his collar and gets rejected.
Do you want to dance?
No, thank you.
Hi there. How about you? Do you want to dance?
Oh, and I forgot to mention, Crazy Ralph is still hanging around too, but not for long. He's garroted from behind a tree, making Jason's first 2 kills the previous movie survivors. This is another death that was censored by the MPAA, but it's just more strangling, not much of a difference. While I didn't mind Alice's death aside from the logistics of Jason tracking her down, Crazy Ralph's death does bother me. I mean, he's a harbinger of doom. Should have been a running joke in every movie that he's right and yet no one believes him. Like, guys, I've told you 8 times now, all these teenagers are gonna die. Oh, shut up, Ralph, you crazy drunk bastard, no one's gonna die. The next day as the counselors exercise, Muffin, Terry's dog, runs into Jason and there's a funny jump cut. Jeff and Sandra sneak off to look for Camp Crystal Lake as the counselors all go swimming. All except for Mark. Can't go swimming, can't go hiking, can't go kayaking, there's no fucking ramps in sight. Why the fuck did they invite this poor guy? Jeff and Sandra find the campsite and what's left of Muffin before they're busted by Deputy Winslow.
What are you kids doing out here?
After escorting the counselors back to the campground, he's out patrolling and spots Jason running into the woods. Deputy Winslow chases after Jason and we get almost 2 minutes of this poor man running through the woods like he's chasing after Mikey Palmisi.
Oh, motherfucker!
He finally stumbles upon Jason's shack. Good lord, imagine the smell. Winslow makes it to Jason's bedroom and sees something shocking, but catches a HAMMERCLAW to the back of the head. This death was censored by the MPAA too, but much like Crazy Ralph, it's just more of the same thing, no extra gore.
I'm proud to be known as Deputy Winslow. In the original script, I wasn't named. I was just kind of an officer of the law. But in the book that followed, I was given a name, and the name was Winslow. An interesting anecdote is that I was hired as this cop, and I had to drive a police car. Now, I have never driven a car in my life, before or since. And for a time, they were giving me some lessons, and I almost killed more people than Jason.
Back at camp with 1 day until they open, Paul offers to take the counselors out for a night on the town.
Tomorrow we'll get serious. Anybody wants a last night on the town, now's your chance.
While Mark and Vicky, Jeff and Sandra and Terry and Scott all stay behind, Ginny, Paul, Ted, and the others end up at a lakeside casino/bar, which was a real business that burned down a few years after filming. I feel like a lot of horror movie locations burned down after filming. I find myself saying that a lot. That's a weird coincidence. Terry goes for a walk and ends up going skinny dipping, an activity that would become synonymous with the Friday the 13th series. We get some fucking sweet full frontal nudity before Scott steals her clothes and runs off, getting caught in a snare.
Scott! Help! Just damn that Paul, him and his wilderness bullshit!
When Terry walks off to get something to cut the rope, Jason takes the opportunity to cut Scott's throat. In a kill that's been mocked by fans since Jason is obviously cutting him with the back of the machete. This too was censored by the MPAA. The uncut version features more blood.
Looking for something?
I was so innocent, you know. I don't know why I was killed. I don't know why Jason had it in for me. It's crazy.
The snare was attached to a sapling tree, and when he cut the rope on the sapling tree, it pulled the rope up, which would have the victim's foot in the rope, and he'd be hanging upside down. In effect, it worked perfectly, and nobody was hurt.
My head gets pulled back by Jason, and he slits my throat. First, they put the machete against it, and then he would pull it, and as he slit, it looked like it was actually cutting it. But they used the dull side of the machete, and many times people have said to me, it looks like you were cut from the wrong side of that machete, and it's quite true.
Terry returns and finds Scott's body and then runs into Jason, who kills her off screen, thereby killing the cutest girl in this movie 51 minutes in. Back at the casino bar, Ginny waxes philosophical about Jason, wondering what he's like now if he does exist.
What if there is a Jason?
Oh, bullshit, Ginny.
No, what if there is some kind of boy or beast running around Camp Crystal Lake? I mean, let's try to think beyond the legend, put it in real terms. I mean, what would he be like today? Some kind of out-of-control psychopath? A frightened retard? A child trapped in a man's body?
All three, actually. Back at camp, we're left with two couples, Jeff and Sandra, who go upstairs to make some fuck, and Mark and Vicky. Vicky's been flirting with Mark throughout the movie, and more often than not, it's not even sexual.
It's football and hockey. Which one do you prefer?
The one with the puck.
You mean hockey?
Is that what you call it?
I don't get it. Is it flirting because puck rhymes with fuck? Anyway, she cuts straight to the point and asks him if his dick works.
Just your legs, huh? Is everything else okay?
Oh, I do all right. One way or another.
When he assures her it does, they agree to find a cabin to bang in. She leaves him behind to go get ready, and by that, she means giving us, the audience, more full frontal nudity as she changes into her sexy underwear. That really doesn't look that different from her regular underwear. Just a word of advice to women out there. We really don't care what kind of underwear you're wearing. You could show up to a guy's house wearing my fucking underwear. We just want you to take it off. She also sprays her cooch with cologne, which I think is kind of gross. Makes me think maybe Sticky Vicky skipped a few showers and she's covering something up. I also hate the smell of perfume since it gives me a vicious headache every time I smell it, so me and Vicky would clearly not mesh well. While Vicky is making up for her lack of hygiene, Mark rolls outside looking for her. Instead, he finds a machete to the face, sending him rolling backwards down a bunch of stairs in one of this franchise's most famous kills, a scene which hilariously pissed off Siskel and Ebert.
Friday the 13th Part 2 is a disheartening and depressing movie because it contains an absolutely negative view of human nature. It's just a series of teenagers who come on screen, say a few words, and then they're hacked to pieces. Among the movie's low points is a kid in a wheelchair who has his head hacked open by a machete. This isn't a movie, it's a cinematic geek show. It seems to be made by and for people with no cheerfulness, no hope, no trust in human nature.
I think that's well said, and I can only add that, yeah, when the machete went into the head of the kid in the wheelchair, that's about when I gave up on the picture.
I thought Tom McBride's kill was cool.
He got a machete in his head and went down a series of steps.
It was just seemed so cruel. You know, here's a guy in a wheelchair and, you know, he's got no way to defend himself, really.
To me, that's like, how can you go much further than that? That's really far.
Actually, he had constructed a rail for the wheelchair to travel on and to make sure that the actor would get hurt.
It was a tremendous amount of work put into it. It was a fantastic stunt back down that staircase.
I don't know if you've ever tried to go down backwards on a wheelchair with a make-believe machete in your head, but it's a challenge.
Upstairs, Jeff and Sandra are laying in bed post-coitus. As opposed to Jack and Marcy from the first movie, we never see Jeff and Sandra have sex. We just get close-ups of their faces and shots where Jeff is covering Sandra with his body. This is because Sandra's actress, Marta Cobra, lied about her age to get the role. When it was discovered she was only 16, the graphic sex scene was nixed, and an already shot scene of full frontal nudity, which would have given this movie 3 instances of full 80s bush, was destroyed. That means throughout the movie, 26-year-old actor Bill Randolph was inadvertently playing grab-ass with a 16-year-old. Jason wanders into the house and finds the mask and spear Ted used earlier to scare everyone. I want you guys to keep in mind that there's some universe where Jason settled on that stupid mask and a spear instead of his usual hockey mask and machete. Jason finds Jeff and Sandra and gives them the old honeymoon harpoon, earning himself a twofer. This death is the most censored by the MPAA, with a lot more sound and a lot more blood. shame since this is the most comprehensive special effect in the movie.
Of course, there was a couple in the bed having sex, and we all know in a horror movie, if you have sex, you have to die because it's wrong, which is not the case in real life.
I thought it was great. You kidding? You know, I thought it was a young guy. You know, you'll be able to, you know, film this, you know, love scene and then get a spear. I thought it was terrific.
Essentially, there was a hole in the floor and both characters were standing in this hole.
Karl Frolerton, who was our makeup guy, I had gone to his place in New Jersey and they had made a latex back, which actually you never see in the film.
So he was actually skewered on camera. That spear actually went into his back on camera. It was fabulous. It was just really fun.
The sound guy, at one point, I'm sitting there on my knees and he comes over to me and he says, how are you? How you doing? Are you okay? I said, you know, yeah, I'm all right. You know, a little uncomfortable. I'm okay. He said, open your mouth. And he blows some powder into my mouth. And I'm telling you, they could have filmed it 15 times. I was having a great time after that.
That skewering scene was actually really fun to set up and really fun to shoot. What a disappointment that it all hit the floor.
When we were prepping Day of the Dead, Karl Fullerton said, oh, you guys want to see some of the gags from Friday the 13th Part 2? We're like, yeah, of course, it would be great. Before it got butchered by the ratings board, the fact that the guy's on top of her and she sees Jason coming and she's struggling and she's trying to push him off of her so she can get out of the way. It was such an effective, disturbing sequence that to this day, I still remember exactly what it looked like.
Vicky, who I completely forgot was still alive, wanders upstairs and wakes up Jason, who gives her a nice slash across the leg. We get a Halloween-style point of view shot as Jason slowly approaches her and then stabs her to death. The uncensored version has a little more mouth blood and a pan to Jeff's body, but not much else. Back at the bar, Ginny and Paul leave a drunk Ted behind and head back to camp. This is the last time we'll see Ted, meaning he completely avoided Jason's wrath and survived the movie.
This place closes. We'll go straight back to camp together. Yes, Bob. Oh, and let Maggie drive the pickup. Yes, Bob.
I actually think it's really interesting to have an important character kind of just miss out on the main plot line. I would have loved the post-credit scene where the news interviews Ted the next day and he has no fucking clue what they're talking about. 38-year-old spoiler alert ahead. But if you really want to see Ted get his comeuppance, watch the movie Christine, where Stu Charno plays a bully who gets blown up. He gets blown up real good. Also, speaking of comeuppance, while I'm glad Ted survived, I'm actually disappointed that unnamed counselor has also survived the movie. I think there was an opportunity here for Jason to slice and dice his way through a crowd of teenagers. Just imagine a dozen arms, legs, and severed heads just being tossed around. It would have been beautiful. These movies can't be gory enough as far as I'm concerned. Ginny and Paul run through the rain to their car. I only mentioned this little scene because Bill Randolph, the actor who played Jeff, can be seen running past Paul and Ginny, something he insisted on because he thought it'd be funny. And you know what? I agree. I like little inside jokes like this for movies. It adds to it somehow.
You can't even tell that it's anything other than a body running through the rain. But it's me. I come back from the dead.
Back at camp, Ginny and Paul arrive to find the place empty except for bloodstains. While they're exploring, we get two unintentional funny lines. First is Paul sounding like he's trying to deny something to Ginny.
Paul, what's going on here?
Nothing.
Oh my god, looks like there was a masker here. No! Then when Ginny sees Jason, she warns Paul in a very Happy Gilmore way.
Paul, there's someone in this fucking room! I'm in the
Ginny just stands there while Paul gets his shit rocked. Then she hides in the bathroom until Jason bursts through the window. She hides in the pantry hoping to cut Jason like in The Shining, but he pitchforks his way through. It's in the pantry where she runs into Crazy Ralph, still hiding in pantries even after death. After Jason pitchforks his way through her car, she takes off running, stopping briefly to take Jason to Dick Kick City. She continues running with Jason in pursuit until she ends up under a bed in Willard's cabin, where Ben walks past her face, causing her to piss herself. Apparently there's some confusion here over who pissed themselves, Ginny or the rat. But come on, I don't think that volume of pee can come out of a small rodent. Also, the rat is still by Ginny's face when the pee comes out from under the bed by her leg, so I don't get it, it's clearly Ginny. Jason tries to get the jump on Ginny, but luckily the chair breaks and Jason busts his ass. Then Ginny defends herself with a chainsaw, which kicks fucking ass, but lasts literally 3 seconds until she runs off again and finds a shortcut to the Voorhees villa.
Please help me!
I seriously love the shot of Jason running towards her in the background. Inside the shack, Ginny finds Jason's shrine to his mother, alongside the bodies of Terry, Deputy Winslow, and Alice, who by this point has turned into a skeleton but still has the ice pick lodged in her head. Also, if Alice is completely rotted, shouldn't Miss Voorhees be too? Food for thought. With Jason closing in on her and nowhere to go, Ginny does the grossest thing in possibly this whole franchise, and puts on Mrs. Voorhees' dirty, crusty, rotten old sweater that's been sitting there for 5 years. Oh, and it brushes against her face too. I'm gonna fucking hork. Now wearing Mrs. Voorhees' sweater, Ginny uses her child psychology skills that were mentioned earlier and imitates Jason's mother, making him drop his guard.
You've done your job well, and Mommy is pleased. That's a good boy.
He's a tragic figure because he was looking for his mother. Now, here, after all this time, Amy's in the lair, and she says,
Jason, Mother is talking to you!
And when I listened to what she said, that's when I did the tilt the head.
Is that my mother? Is that my mother? My heart broke. I really felt bad for poor Jason.
I felt what I was doing through the whole thing. I really did.
We see from Jason's point of view a hallucination of Mrs. Voorhees, with Betsy Palmer reprising her role for the last time in this series. The footage of Ms. Voorhees was shot very quickly in a Connecticut studio in front of a black screen. Apparently it was shot by Wes Craven, but I couldn't find any confirmation of that. She manages to talk Jason down and is almost ready to get him with the machete, when he spots his real mother's head behind Ginny and deflects the hit with his pickaxe. She avoids hitting Jason in the movie, but in real life she couldn't avoid hitting Steve Dash and sending him to the hospital.
I have the machete behind my back, and I'm instructed to pull the machete up, and just as Mrs. Voorhees' face is revealed, he's supposed to bring up this pickaxe, and then that's when I bring the machete down.
There was a lot of discussion before that scene was shot. It was ultimately decided that Amy could do it, so Cliff took her, and he walked her through it a couple of times on what would happen. Make sure you hit the pickaxe in the middle and so forth and so on. She is a great actress, but unfortunately that day for me, she was trying to kill me.
So I guess I got really anxious, and I brought the machete down when he still had the pickaxe like this as opposed to this.
She missed the pickaxe, and she came down on my finger.
And I felt so bad. But the actor who played Jason was really cool about it. You know, he just said, hey, this is what happens. This is what happens when you're a stunt person. So then he goes to the hospital. I think he had the machete through his chest or something, and walks into the emergency room, and they're like, oh my God.
I'm walking in with the machete sticking out of my shoulder, and everybody in the emergency room. And I walked up to the desk. I says, have you got anything for a headache? I got a very bad headache.
Paul makes a heroic return and, actually helps Ginny, who once again just stands around while Paul fights for his life. Until finally, when Jason is about to kill Paul, she puts her lazy ass to work and slams a machete into Jason's shoulder, lodging it nice and deep, almost to his chest. She grabs Jason's sack and unmasks him before her and Paul hightail it out of there, with Paul, who, keep in mind, has now had 2 fistfights with Jason, having to carry her lazy ass back to the cabin. There's a sound at the door, and Ginny and Paul load up on weapons ready to attack Jason, but instead it's just Muffin who made a heroic return. Personally, I think it would have been really, really funny if it was Ted at the door and Ginny accidentally stuck him with a pitchfork. Anyway, Muffin's back, Ginny and Paul are safe, Ted avoided the massacre, all is right with the world. Ha! Wrong. Surprise Jason. This marks Warrington Gillette's only appearance as Jason. For years it was thought that Gillette and Steve Dash had split the role of Jason 50-50, but that's not the case. Anytime you see Jason wearing the sack mask, which is all the time, it's Steve Dash.
I could never figure out the deal with Jason. They had a guy for a while, I believe his name was Warrington, and then he didn't seem to like doing it, or he didn't want to do stunts or something, and then he didn't stay for the whole movie.
I got a call from Cliff Cudney, who happened to be the stunt coordinator on Friday the 13th too, and he had called me and said, listen, I'm up here in Connecticut doing this film, and the guy that they hired to play Jason can't do his own stunts. We got a big problem. He said, can you get up to Kent, Connecticut?
They give me a black script. It said Jason on the front of it. Well, we'd like you, for this counselor role. I guess this was the role that ultimately John Fury got. And so then they said, well, would you like to be Jason? Well, sure, yeah. I'd love to do anything you want me to do.
I know that the rest of us on set, we knew that there was stuff going on about Warrington and Steve, and in terms of who was doing what.
If you'd asked me who was Jason, I would have said Warrington.
Warrington Gillette was my Jason Voorhees.
He got all the hoopla, you know, for everything that I did. Cliff Cudney, the stunt coordinator, said to me, "You're the guy that was the Jason. Tell your story. You did all the work."
But to me, you know, the real talent come in, yeah, with Karl Fullerton trying to create this face that was pretty intense. And yeah, you would get in the makeup chair at noon, they'd be ready to go at 7. So it's a process.
So when I'm down there waiting, they're coming in, and I'm behind the couch, I was like a little kid, you know what I mean? I was like, I couldn't wait. I said, oh, this is gonna be good, you know? Amy with the screaming and the whole thing, and that's when the chase scene started.
There was a lot of physical action in the film. I had to jump out of this window, and I remember the stunt guy said, you know, maybe you could get a stunt adjustment for that. But yeah, it was a lot of running, splashing through the puddles, jumping, hiding. A lot of it was hiding.
The scene where Jason comes careening through the window, look, you thought he was dead, and it's the greatest shock.
I know that the Jason coming through the window was a nightmare for me. I had to do it 3 times, and it was really scary.
And yeah, it's plenty scary, the mystery of the unknown. What is behind that potato sack?
We never saw the makeup, and he didn't want me to see it, and so he wanted it to look really real. You know, because we could have walked up to the makeup area and seen what this guy looked like, so we wouldn't have been as shocked when he, blasts through the window.
They built a platform outside the house. The platform was probably 4 feet long. So we coordinated how many steps it takes. So 1, 2, 3, boom, through the window. And at this time in my life, I was not a well-seasoned stuntman. So this was the first time I jumped through a window.
Steve was, he knew how I felt about that scene. And I remember he was, he goes, hey, let's go have lunch. And he was trying to kind of play it really cool and not let me know. And then all of a sudden he said, guess what? We have to reshoot that scene again. Ruined my day.
But anyway, look, the proof is in the scene because we got it right and people are still talking.
As Jason grabs a hold of Ginny, we see a fade to white, and then we see Ginny being taken away in a stretcher, asking for Paul.
Paul? Where's Paul?
She never gets a reply, and the movie ends with a zoom in on Mrs. Voorhees' severed head. She was supposed to wink at the audience, but that was cut because they thought it was too stupid. I agree. So about that ending. Apparently it confuses people who don't know if Paul survived or not. I never understood why. It seems clear to me that the second fight in Jason's cabin took place, since when we zoom in on Miss Voorhees' severed head, we see the beams that Paul and Jason broke while fighting. So that means Jason really got a machete to the shoulder. Paul took a passed out Ginny back to the cabin where she dreamed that Muffin returned and Jason came through the window and attacked her. He clearly didn't attack her in real life, since she's okay the next day being put in the ambulance. For people who think the window attack was real, what do they think happened? Jason jumped through the window and attacked Ginny but didn't kill her, then killed Paul and left? I don't get the confusion. Paul's still alive, Ted's still alive, and Ginny survives. Moves to New York, starts stress eating from PTSD, gets a job working the tie rack at Wanamaker's, meets a gangster named John Sacramone, gets married, has some kids, and eventually gets made fun of by Ralph Cifaretto. It's all there if you read between the lines. But I'll break it down for you anyway. I'll give the plot 2.5 stars. I knocked it down a star from the first movie because of a few reasons. First of all, the first 5 minutes of this movie is literally the last 5 minutes of the first movie. Second, there's no twist to praise this time around, unlike that Mrs. Voorhees revelation in part 1. And finally, it ends with a dream sequence. I understand they had a winning formula, but you don't have to do the exact same thing. I'm rating the effects in this movie based on the original effects, not the uncut version. But you know what? The effects in this movie aren't really notable. Not because of Karl Fullerton or the MPAA, but because the deaths didn't call for it. An ice pick to the head, a strangulation, a hammer to the head, a throat slit, and whatever the fuck happened to Terry don't really call for special effects, unlike the 2 arrow deaths, the axe to the head, and the beheading from the first movie. So I'll give the effects 2.5 stars. I think the characters in part 2 are an improvement on the characters in part 1. No offense to Alice, but Ginny's a more developed final girl. She's a lot more outspoken and she has the child psychology background, although she did drop the ball when it came to helping Paul. I also like Ted more than Ned, and I like Mark, Vicky, Terry, and Scott too. Although I like Bill, the love interest from the first movie, more than I like Paul, the love interest from this movie. Also, this movie has the added bonus of introducing adult Jason. For that, I'll give it 3.5 stars. Finally, the kills. Kill of the week goes to Mark. It's one of the landmark kills of the series. It also shows Jason is willing to kill a kid in a wheelchair, and it's hilarious as well. Kill of the week goes to Vicky. I know what you're thinking. What about Terry, who seemingly has a heart attack? Well, that's an off-screen death. It's easy to pick on. Vicky was an important character whose death was entirely on screen, and she was the last kill in the movie, and her death totally sucked. Inexcusable. Best non-kill sequence is a tough one because there's not many to pick from. I'd like to pick the 2 instances of full frontal nudity, but I'm sure finding naked women attractive will piss off someone someday. So I'll go with Ginny tricking Jason by putting on his mom's sweater. Not only because it was a clever move from her, but because it seriously grossed me out. As for the rating, I gave the first movie, which was 50-50 as far as noticeable kills, a 2.5. This movie has even less notable kills, with only 1/3 being notable, those being Scott, Jeff, Sandra, and Mark. So I'm going to give the kills here 1.5 stars, making my overall rating for Part 2 10 stars, giving it a C rating. And that's that. That's the rating you get when the only thing you improve on is the characters.